Hey everyone. I have no idea if anyone's gonna start watching this. It's Friday, but sometimes it means people are online. If you are, thanks for tuning in. I will be doing a little more live reading of Withered Kingdom, my fantasy novel, which is now available on Amazon as a paperback for $12 and as a Kindle ebook for $3.99. I'm considering starting up as well an opportunity for people to start sharing my stuff as a way to enter for a chance to get a signed copy of my book for free. Just whoever does it the most shares. That'll be for Facebook only. I haven't set that up yet, but just a heads up, if you haven't bought my book yet and you want the chance to get it for free and signed, that's an opportunity available to you or anyone. This is really interesting that it's shooting. My camera is shooting in this weird box shape. I don't know why it's doing that, but know that I'm looking down here at my book, one of my physical copies. I don't like that it's reversed like that, but anyway, before I read the overture, which is kind of the prologue, I just call it an overture because I use theatrical language for the book, and then I have scenes and parts broken down like that, as if the whole book was Act 1 to a play. So scene 1 starts after the prologue, the overture, and it goes through the story of Gia, the main character, being arraigned before King Magilophyron, who judges him to be potentially an intruder in his kingdom, potentially part of the rival empire trying to break down his rule and topple the Phyronian kingdom. So Gia has to plead his case without even having really any memories. His friend, General Nova, a half-giant, gives his testimony in favor of Gia, and Gia, in the last part that I read, tells his story of how he came to meet General Nova and his very first memories since waking up on this planet. And this part that I'm about to read picks up right after. This section is called Sentence. It is Gia and the king having their conversation before the king is able to pass any kind of judgment. It's the two of them in a room just having a conversation. I don't know how far I'll go. It's probably as far as I can before my mouth dries up from reading out loud too much. I don't have a drink with me, which was probably poor planning, but here goes. So part 4, Sentence. The camp obviously survived. Then what? Magillo paused. Is that it? You just marched here with the rest of them? King Magillo rubbed his palm on the pommel of his sword like he was letting Gia's story simmer in his head. There's nothing much to mention, except that the bag Nova threw wasn't the one with the mushrooms in it. It was a different one with a bunch of rings. When we got to the camp, the Oog were already killed, and we ate better that night than we have ever since. He went back during dinner to get the bag. Are the rings important to mention? No, why? He was obsessed about finding one of them. They mean nothing to me. We came straight here after a long march. We haven't bathed, as you can see. So, you are a windcaster. Magillo sat quite still, having stated this, and even closed his eyes for a second, then opened them and continued. As hard as that is to accept, I'm disinclined to deny it. I never thought of the angels as casters, but it seems obvious now. I hardly believe it myself. Polaris, the king looked over his shoulder. Bring in the general. I have one last order for him. What's that? Gia asked as Polaris stood up and left. I have made my decision. Gia twisted his back in his chair to watch Nova and Polaris enter the room. Nova came in and rested a hand on Gia's shoulder. Polaris walked over to the king's right-hand side and sat with his hands folded behind his back. General Nova, I have an assignment for you. Magillo fastened the belt of his sword scabbard across one shoulder so the weapon rested on his back. Your Majesty? General, While you were out, Kilaba was attacked. Its walls hold, but Captain Jadrian thinks the Orcanians are preparing to lay siege. You are to assemble your choice of soldiers from the castle guard and head north at breakfast tomorrow morning. I'll start with Gia then, Nova nodded. Gia is staying with me, Magello said. The words made Gia's chest feel tight. You may say your goodbyes to him now. I know how quick you make friends, so here's your chance to bid each other farewell. Your Majesty, Gia is a capable fighter. He could help up in Kilaba. I have no doubt of that, Magello said. But I knew as soon as I saw this young man that he was different. Angel wasn't my first thought, but I can't deny it now. He's going to stay with me until either his memory recovers or we find more of his associates. Even if we're both wrong and he's just a spy, I can't let him leave here. Have your troop ready at dawn. Wave. Hi, Bobby. You're keeping him prisoner? Angel or not, he trespasses on my lands. He must prove his worth. Magello looked Gia in the eyes. Gia couldn't bear to keep eye contact for more than a second. Just like any man your age in this kingdom, you must serve your year of required military service. I'm appointing you to the royal guard. I beg your pardon, your majesty, but isn't he entitled to a public trial? Nova stuttered something out before he could be dismissed. Fironian subjects and citizens of the Protectorate are. Prisoners of war are subject to the whim of the crown, Magello explained. But you haven't judged him to be a prisoner of war. You declared him an angel. General, since he's not a prisoner of war, he should be subject to his choice of public trial. Nova's hands waved as he spoke. Gia could tell Polaris fixed an icy glare at the general. I don't mean to interrupt, but as a general, I do have a duty to ensure the carriage of justice. General Nova, Magello stood up. I admire your sense of justice, but the decision is mine, not his. I have made my decision. Gia cannot be tried as either a prisoner of war or a citizen. He must be treated as a foreigner. He has committed no crime as a foreigner. He didn't resist arrest. He was compliant, more or less. Gia gave Nova a side-eye glance and then let his head droop. Silence, Magello said. He is a trespasser and doesn't know our ways. It would be best for him to work with me here. Besides, he has no legal counsel. And I volunteer. Nova raised his hand, and Polaris scoffed in response. If Gia agrees, I can act as his representative. I know the laws and can make an informed decision with him. Unbelievable. Magello lifted his crown, pulled his hair under it, and pressed the crown back down. Very well. Gia's eyes caught the movement of Polaris's arms as he dropped them from folded to neutral. You have the right to a public trial, Nova said to Gia and laid his hand on his shoulder. That means you have the choice of 2 different examinations. One, you can have a hearing in front of your peers who will then vote you guilty or not guilty of trespassing. 2, you can fight in trial by combat. You would face your accuser or their champion in a fight. Clearly the better option. I'm not going to fight your king, Gia stage whispered. You've got to be kidding me. If you don't fight, you will be held in the dungeon until a jury can be found. If you fight tonight, there's only 2 or 3 hours in lockup. Dungeons! Great! Those sound like fantastic options. Gia wanted to shove Nova away, but held back the urge. It's not a fight to the death, Nova waved his hands. Either you or your opponent can yield at any time. You fight on a stage in this town square. Just don't fall off or you lose. What happens if I lose? The whim of the crown. That really doesn't sound so bad, Nova. As a trespasser, you could be beheaded. Okay. Just got an emergency weather alert. I think that interrupted the stream. If it's still going, I hope it is. It says live. I will continue. That was very unusual. Never had this phone do that before. So, I'll go back a little bit. What happens if I lose? The whim of the crown. That really doesn't sound so bad, Nova. As a trespasser, you could be beheaded. I know that's not what he plans for you, but if you are tricking all of us and have no real angelic powers, you're about to be 10 pounds lighter really quick. What? Your head weighs... never mind. Nova lifted from a crouch to take a deep breath, then crouched back down to speak with Gia. If you win, you have to serve your 1 year of mandatory military service. If you do, you can come with me to Kiliba. I'd be a slave to your war, Gia shrugged. Kiliba's beautiful. It better be. Gia hung his head low enough that his chin touched his chest, then sighed until his shoulders slacked. Better than being stuck here. He looked over the walls of the room, feeling pressed upon by their flat gray color, rubbed raw by their rough stone, and weakened by the drafty windows. It's a month-long march to Kiliba, friend. Nova sounded kind again, almost like he was speaking to a boy 15 years younger than Gia actually was. Lots to see, people to meet. All right, Gia muttered subvocally. His eyes grew wide as he thought he might have just admitted to lying about being an angel. He never claimed to be one, he remembered, but he still felt his stomach sink. He realized how bad an idea it was to ask for a fight. A fight was the last thing he wanted in the world, but before he could open his mouth again, Nova blurted out their decision. Trial by combat! The king moved his gaze from the general to Gia. Who will I fight? Your opponent will be chosen by the time of your trial. Magillo let slip a small half-smile for a second. The trial will take place at sundown as the entertainment for the town feast tonight. Until the people are satisfied by your striving, you will be confined to the dungeon. Welcome to the Silver Rock Inn. Pause there for a second. So part 5 is called Silver Rock Inn. That's just kind of a euphemism for the dungeon of the castle. All right, I'll resume reading. The castle dungeon itself smelled like a sewer, so Gia kept his nose covered. A pair of royal guards escorted him to a solitary cell on the first floor below the castle. The ground was cobblestone, and the cell walls were made up of thick iron bars on 3 sides and solid stone at his back. There was a bucket for waste and a wooden bench that had been overturned for some time, which looked rotted. He felt unsure whether the other cells being mostly empty was a good sign or not. On one hand, he considered that the fewer the prisoners, the less often people got in real trouble in this kingdom. On the other hand, maybe most of the prisoners that would be filling up the cells were already dead. They could have been executed already. Gia was sure of 2 things. He wanted to get out, and he didn't want to have to kill anyone or die as entertainment for the townsfolk. Hey, Austin. After some more thought, he realized killing in the town square would probably be upsetting to most stomachs and ruin the feast. He told himself he wouldn't be allowed to die in combat. The escorts locked him in and left. All he could do was wait. The sound of dripping water from somewhere in the distance reminded him of just how far underground he was. It snowed that morning, but there wouldn't be any frost this far below the ground. The temperature was stagnant and the air was stale. Even if it was a few degrees warmer than it was outside, it made his fingers, toes, and the tip of his nose numb as the hours wore on. If he was accounting for time correctly, which he doubted, it must be close to sundown. The corners of his cell were dark, but he didn't want to check them out. At best, there could be blankets folded up there, or at worst, bones of the previous tenants, and an awful pale foresight into his future. He sat quite still upon his little bench, facing the bars while his vision lost focus and he let his eyelids drop. Was he ever going to get out? With all of the wind power in the world, he couldn't see a way to break through the metal bars. They were as thick as his wrists. The door itself had to be at least 1,000 pounds, far too much to lift on his own. If he could, he thought, the door might just rise up out of its hinge. With a nudge forward or back, it would fall straight to the ground, and he would be free to make a break for it. Then, his wind casting would be incredibly useful, he thought. He could just fight past the guards. Gia snapped his eyes open and stood up. He tried to recreate the gust of wind he had used when he fought the oogs, but nothing happened. He swung his hands, but nothing happened. It was as if his aura was gone. It wasn't something he imagined, was it? Of course, he blew out the torch Nova presented him just earlier that day. Why wasn't it working now? He tried again. The warm, air-like feeling of his aura moving around his body wasn't there. He took a deep breath, held it for a moment, and exaggerated the hand motion of pushing wind forward. It tingled through his bones like there was still a tiny wisp of aura inside him, but it wouldn't move. He tried one last time, exhaling with all the force he could summon. He dropped to the ground of the cell and kicked the bench backward. The scraps of straw and crumbled clay stung his palms, so he wiped them away, trying to rest on all fours in humiliated silence, without pricking his hands. Then he noticed something about the floor. It was cobblestone like the rest of the castle, but there was something engraved in it. He felt a curve under his fingers and traced it throughout the whole floor of the cell. It was a circle. His hands turned blackish-brown from constantly scraping against the floor until he cleared enough of the dirt on the ground to reveal about 5 concentric circles, with markings at certain points and lines making intersections between different symbols, like pictograms, and what he assumed were letters. This engraving took up most of the cell, and the longer he looked at it, the more he realized it was glowing with the faintest light. Not only that, but it was his light, his aura light, the same color and texture Nova helped him to manipulate, was in the lines, circles, and symbols of this enormous engraving. He got up and pulled all the aura he could into one hand, and tried to push it down into the circle. The engraving sucked the aura in like it was water being poured into a long, shallow trough. It filled the symbols and circle, and after some time, faded away. He thudded onto the floor, weak. It took too much out of him. He fought to keep his eyes open and lifted his chin high to get enough breath to keep his aura flowing. Emotionally, it felt half like defeat, half like satisfaction. It wasn't his fault that he couldn't produce the aura energy, and it certainly wasn't because he imagined it the whole time. The rest of his body was weighed down, hollow from the loss of power. Even if he could, with some titanic effort, lift the door off its hinges, there was no way he was going to fight his way out. Now that he was this weak, he wasn't going to be able to fight until the morning. Why didn't it occur to him before? This is a prison, after all. Of course, they would have to have some kind of way to prevent dangerous casters from tearing the place apart and breaking free. His fist thudded on the ground. Before the last echo of the hit, a sound came from far down the hallway in front of his cell. Someone walked in, or at least it sounded like a person. Whoever it was walked closer and wore heavy boots. Their clothing did not match the rugged sound of the boots as the person came into view. It was a priest. As well as Gia could tell. A large man stood before him, as wide and well cut as Nova, but only a few inches taller than Gia, not a full foot. The white robe spoke of some kind of holy man, but the body underneath looked like muscles built for hauling stone. The man had a hard face, with a smile that pulled the rest of his skin into ripples. His long chestnut hair was in a braid, and he carried a book in his hand, tucked under his left upper arm. The opposite hand lay on his chest as if covering some kind of amulet. I would have come sooner, but I had to wait until they called on me or they would suspect something, the man said. Do I know you? Gia asked and watched the smile on the man's face sag down and the wrinkles vanish. You don't recognize me? I don't remember anything before a week or so ago. Are you here to read me my last rites before they kill me? Gia, no. How do you know my name? Do you know Nova? I know of him, sure, but we haven't met. Good heavens, Gia, have you really forgotten everything? It seemed like the priest's eyes would stream with tears any second. Why are you here? Gia pulled his knees to his chest and wrapped his arms around them. I'm so sorry, young one. The priest wiped his cheeks and mouth with one gnarled hand and breathed in deep enough to expand his whole core, then let it all out. I can't believe it. Then he wouldn't make eye contact until he had shaken the wave of emotion off. You must know Nova, Gia said. Don't lie to me. It's unbecoming of a priest. Gia said over his knees, You wouldn't know the name he came up with for me if you didn't know him. I'm not a priest. I'm Aqua. You seriously can't remember anything? With the last word, the priest clutched the bars of the cell, almost dropping his book. No. Gia's voice cut through the whole floor of the dungeon, then fell to silence until the priest sniffled. General Nova only named you Gia because he recognized you for who you truly are. Without even meeting you beforehand, he's an insightful individual, if he can do that. Without even meeting you beforehand, he's an insightful individual if he can do that. How else would you come up with the same name if he didn't tell you? It had to be him, or the king, or his attendant. Everyone in this land knows the name Gia. The priest opened the book and leafed through some pages. You're the only one they actually named. They call the rest of us. Wow, I missed a word. They call the rest of us the burning one, the quaking one, and the crashing one. His arms danced with the last name, looking almost offended to speak it. What is that book? It's a scripture of the Phyronians. The priest, who called himself Aqua, flipped through a few more pages before closing it again. They had seers long ago who saw everything we did and wrote it down. They only gave your name explicitly. They saw everything. And now, millions read about it in this book. If you know about my past, just tell me where I'm from and who I am. I can't tell you everything, he licked his lips. You wouldn't believe a word of it, trust me. Then how do I know you're telling the truth? I got here months ago, in the middle of winter. I forgot a lot, but not everything. As soon as I heard rumors that there was a prisoner who had lost his memory, I had to come and see you. I will help you get your memory back, I promise. Even if it takes time, I'll help you. You can start by getting me out of this prison, Gia stood up, feeling energy fill his body back up to normal again. They're going to make me fight tonight, and I really don't want to risk getting myself killed, only to die after they conscript me into the military tomorrow. Ah. Aqua scratched the back of his neck and whistled a low descending tone. You see, I'm not really a priest. I found the clothes and lied to get my way down to see you. Come on, if you could do that, I'm sure you can swipe a key. Together we can fight our way out of here. Are you a caster? Aqua laughed at the question. I am, but it's not that easy. They keep better track of keys than priests' robes. This is a dungeon, after all. Gia sighed, turned around and set his bench back up and sat on it, facing away from Gia. I'll see what I can do, Gia. Facing away from Aqua. I'll see what I can do, Gia. It won't be quick, but I will figure out a way to get you out of here. I can't cast down here. Gia turned to see over his shoulder. There's something carved into the stone and is draining my aura before I can use it. Maybe you can break me out of here. The whole dungeon is sealed, not just the individual cells. He looked back down the hallway where he came from, then back to the prisoner. Sealed? No aura for anyone down here. Aqua adjusted his pose so he looked more like a priest. Win your fight tonight, and we'll figure out how to find the others. Who? Gia asked, facing Aqua again. What others? Heaven bless you, Aqua said, winked, and walked toward the clattering of armor Gia only just noticed. Sure enough, another pair of guards appeared and ushered Aqua away, and just like that, he was alone again. So, I'm going to take a break there. I'll keep reading, but I'm just a little confused as to how I missed a word there. I've read this thing over so many times, had other people read it over. Also helps to rest my voice for a moment. They call the rest of the burning one the quick. Yeah, I missed a word. Part 6. The night's entertainment. Gia awoke to his door being opened by the guards, without realizing he had even fallen asleep. He thought it was the next morning already, but he must have overjudged the passing of time. It was nighttime, just before the blue finished draining out of the western sky. There were stars just about everywhere, but the town square was lit with torches and large fires, where great cauldrons were steaming and wafting out the smell of stewed vegetables. The scent transformed into something like a full, hearty meal to the hungry amnesiac, even as the guards escorted him in chains through the crowd. A rectangular wooden stage in the middle of the square stood about 5 feet off the ground. It was empty for the moment. A table of weapons lay before him. He felt like they wanted to use a sword. He felt like they wanted him to use a sword, as there was about 5 different ones lying on the tablecloth. But that didn't feel right to him. He passed up a set of knives and some other weapons he either couldn't identify or didn't know how to use. One weapon stuck out to him. He eyed what he thought was a simple shaft of wood until he noticed a brass sleeve on one end that made that end heavier. He figured it had once been a spear and that the point had been broken off, and the brass sleeve was meant to secure the blade to the shaft. He grabbed it and held it for a moment before hearing someone call his name. "Gia, over here!" Gia heard Nova over the cheering crowd. The guards unchained him and let him go to the general. Gia followed Nova's pointing finger to the portable stairs where he stood. "All right, rules. It's best 2 out of 3, yields or knockdowns. You're fighting the king's retainer. He's an ice caster who fights with a sword and shield. Don't let his age fool you." "What does that mean?" Gia asked, leaning on his staff to hear Nova over the townspeople. "You met him." Nova waved a hand but kept talking like an auctioneer. "You need some aura pointers. Number 1, if you run out of aura, you will pass out or die. Number 2, aura regenerates slowly. 3, your aura may surge up when you're excited, but you can only hold on to so much at once. Got it?" "I hardly know how to..." "Shout yield if you're in danger. It will give him a point, but use the break to center yourself. First person to 2 points is the victor. You can't get in trouble for killing, but it's in your best interest to keep things clean. This is a public trial. You're here to win them over." "Which one was the retainer?" "He's over there." Nova waved a hand indistinctly. "But one last thing. If you step off the stage, you lose." "Lose a point?" "No, lose the whole trial." Having received the news, Gia climbed up the stairs. Tough canvas like a ship's sail covered the top of the stage. The guards moved the stairs, and Gia gulped without thinking about it. He shook out his arms and turned to see his opponent. In a moment, even with the combatant's back turned, he recognized him. No, I can't do this. The king wants me to fight his main guy?" Gia tried to get Nova's attention, but couldn't over the increased cheers. Magelo's assistant, Polaris, was opposite him on the stage. The ice caster slid a thick padded jacket over his shoulders and fastened it tight. 2 more guards stood beside him and handed him his weapons for the march. Gia couldn't identify one of the weapons at first, but could see the other was a sword. The sword was new and rugged in design, intended solely for combat. Gia could only tell the other weapon was a shield by the way he strapped it onto his arm. It was not metal, but something that looked more like a lizard's scale, only it was the size of his torso and shined milky white. Both combatants looked to the castle balcony where the king was preparing to speak. I'll take a moment to adjust how I'm sitting here. Takes a lot more out of you to read publicly than you think, if you haven't done it in a long time. The king was preparing to speak. "People of Silver Rock and regions round about, welcome to the spring feast and the surprise trial by combat." The people fell silent. "Gia, an outsider, accused of being a spy for the Orncanian Empire, is your guest tonight. His fate will be decided in a contest of strength and wit against Polaris, who represents each of you. Should Gia defeat Polaris, you may show your willingness to welcome him into your society. If not, he is not worthy and will remain a prisoner until this war has ended. Now, let the battle begin." The king took a glass of wine and sat down. "Gia, be careful. Polaris is the most powerful caster in the king's army," Nova said. But Gia couldn't take his eyes off Polaris after they locked eyes. Go, Gia. He's giving you the first move. Try to save your energy. This won't be a quick fight if you play it smart. He'll drop you if you get careless for even a moment. It was unsettling to hear Nova so somber. Are you ready? Gia asked Polaris, who may not have even heard it by his lack of reaction. He hesitated, then ran toward the royal attendant. Gia opened by swinging the heavier end of his staff at full length at Polaris's sword arm. Polaris shifted his hips and shoulder to block with the shield. The impact against the giant scale sent a shock through the wood and stung Gia's hands. The staff fell, so he swiped his hands downward to grab it. As he reached, Polaris stepped in and slashed at Gia's head. The amnesiac dropped his head, seized the staff, and rolled. He ended up on his feet and stayed low, expecting another slash, but saw the tip of the blade cocked back for a stab. Polaris's arm pulsed forward like a piston, projecting the tip so fast it would have skewered through Gia if he had not rolled again at the last second. From the roll, Gia swung the wood shaft, but met only the shield. This time he kept the spear in hand and grit his teeth through the pain in his hands. Holding the spear from the unweighted end, Gia stood up and fended off the impressive flurry of strikes, until a plume of sawdust and wood fibers burst out from the end just under the brass sleeve. Gia retracted his staff and let Polaris get closer. The royal attendant stepped in, covering his core, and slashed low and wide. Gia blocked with the lower portion of his weapon and couldn't see the foot headed for his face. Gia's jaws clacked together and he fell out flat on his back, making the stage boards creak and the crowd rise to near riot levels of shouting for a moment. Polaris turned away, lifted his sword to the announcement that he had won 1 point, and took a few steps away. The amnesiac stood up, checking the integrity of his weapon. He figured it would hold together, provided he didn't keep blocking with the wood just below the metal brace. He didn't get it. Polaris must have been in his 60s, but he moved like a 20-something. Gia knew he was outmatched, but he figured he could still surprise the older man. A guard shouted for the next round to begin, and Polaris took the offensive right away. Polaris ran in and slammed the shield into Gia, which felt like a rolling boulder, but Gia stayed up. Polaris rolled the shield to one side and stabbed. Gia spun to the side and forward, setting himself up to get beside the attendant. Gia swung his arms and hit Polaris in the meat of his neck with his bare wrist. Polaris stepped back and repeated the process. Shield slam, roll off, and stab. This time Gia went to the other side and realized too late how bad an idea that was. He was body flat against the shield. Polaris shoved forward and Gia went to the ground again. Instinct took over and Gia rolled backward and ended up on his feet without spending a moment prone. The amnesiac thrusted the metal portion of his spear shaft and met the front of the shield. Polaris deflected the shaft, but saw something he didn't want to see. Gia unhanded the shaft and was sprinting the one pace between them, cocking back a punch. Too late to lift his sword arm, Polaris took the knuckles into the chest and dropped the sword to seize Gia by the throat. He gripped Gia's shoulder with the hand behind his shield and snarled like an animal. Down! Polaris squeezed with both hands like he was trying to wring rocks in half, and bent Gia backward until the amnesiac thought his back might snap. I know what you are, and I'm going to end this before you hurt anyone. Gia lifted his arms between Polaris's and struck the shielded hand off his shoulder. The other hand on his throat, no longer anchored by the hand's grip, caused Polaris to fall to Gia's side. Before he hit the ground, though, the royal attendant slid on his heels and kept his grip on Gia's neck. Gia unlocked the choking arm's elbow and kept his weight on Polaris to keep him down. The amnesiac rolled the hand off his throat and dropped the knee down Polaris's center and pinned him to the ground. The people roared in shock. It was all over so quickly. The guard announcing the score could hardly believe it. Gia stepped back and refused the urge within him to help his opponent up. Polaris got up as though completely unfazed, except for the look of deep bloodlust in his eyes. He spat on the ground and went to pick up his sword for the final round. The guard announced the third round, and Gia stayed in place. He hadn't picked up his weapon, but was rubbing his throat and coughing. He took note that he was only a step away from the edge of the stage. The red flush that had taken over his face was finally draining down for him to see Polaris carefully advance, his shield covering the lower half of his face and sword hidden from view. Gia took a defensive stance and coughed just before seeing the sword drop again. Polaris detached his shield and flung it at Gia's ankles. As it slid on the ground, it spun and sounded like a stone slab was about to crush his ankles where he stood. The amnesiac strafed away, but only fast enough to save one leg from the hit. His left ankle flung back with the shield, and both dropped off the edge of the stage. A chill ran through Gia's body as he felt a few blades of grass brush his foot. He wanted to flee the edge like the ground was shark-infested water, but Polaris was running full bore toward him. The royal attendant had his sword prepared for a sweeping slash, perceiving slowed time that only the fight-or-flight response could provide. Gia weighed the options in his mind, either to move forward and take the sword or lose the battle without question by avoiding the attack and falling over the edge. Gia sprang forward with all available haste. He went directly into the path of Polaris's blade, hoping for just one thing, that Polaris might hesitate at the last second. He knew he would take a hit, but it might not be lethal. The amnesiac was right. Polaris pulled away during the swing, making the sword continue at half speed as it collided with his outstretched left arm and side. The metal of the sword blade cut into Gia's skin, leaving a long bleeding gash down his side and all the way up his ribs. But Gia's left hand connected with Polaris. The amnesiac squeezed the padded jacket of his opponent and pulled him sideways, away from the sword. "Stop!" Polaris called out as they both tumbled sideways. Gia grabbed Polaris's chest with his other hand as well, and rolled them both toward the edge. Polaris pulled Gia in close, and ended up only speeding their mutual roll toward the ground. I'm having big trouble reading apparently right now. Nobody could tell clearly who hit the dirt first, but Polaris kept squirming and grabbing to hold Gia down on the ground. Normally both fighters would be disqualified, but in this case we must have another round or there can be no winner, the officiating guard announced, and motioned for some other guards to separate the two combatants. The guard boosted them back onto the stage, but spaced them apart. They gave both of them their weapons back and fled the stage as the announcer called for the final round to resume. "I've had enough of this. Give up and I'll make sure you're treated well in the dungeons," Polaris said, once again hiding his mouth behind the large shield. "Believe me, I don't want to fight, but I can't live the rest of my life in a cell." Gia felt vulnerable until a whispering breeze came by. "Let's finish this." Gia swung the full length of his weapon like a broom. Only the air he moved through became a powerful gust of wind that blew Polaris backward. The royal attendant kept his footing and had to duck for a moment behind his shield to keep the windswept dust and sand out of his eyes. Polaris peered over the top of his shield to see the amnesiac running and tilting his spear shaft downward like a pole vaulter. Gia stuck the metal end of his shaft between two boards of the stage and lifted his body up. Polaris ducked and put the shield above his head, expecting Gia to complete the vault, but instead heard a loud, crackling pop. The spear shaft had broken at its weak point under the metal brace, and Gia purposefully refrained from jumping over Polaris. This resulted in the bent staff springing forward and snapping with exposed splinters of wood at Polaris's knees, face, and sword-wielding arm. The quick flick of the broken wood slashed Polaris as it released the last of its pent-up pressure against the raised shield, forcing Polaris off balance. Gia dropped the shaft of wood, jumped now to land on Polaris, and pin him in place for the victory. Polaris laid flat down on the stage and held his sword out like a spike. The amnesiac flailed in the air, making him land gracelessly beside Polaris, and took recourse in a frantic flopping roll across the width of his body to escape the sword's predictable counterattacks. "Trickster!" Polaris spat as he chased after Gia, swinging his sword toward the stage. Gia found himself once again nearing the edge and stopped on his back to face Polaris. The royal attendant lifted his sword for a full-length chop, but as the sword reached its height above Gia's head, it changed. Polaris's aura surged for a moment and shot up his arms and into the sword. The blade was encased in thick crystal ice. The ice sword came crashing down like a battle axe, shattering its new casing upon impact. Gia rolled toward Polaris at the last second and wrapped his arms around the attendant's ankles. Gia again rolled toward the edge, bending Polaris's knees and pulling him face forward toward the penalty area. Polaris stabbed his sword into the dirt and held himself up as if he was a plank extending off the stage. Gia tried to throw Polaris's legs off to earn him the match, but Polaris's feet were frozen to the stage. It seemed as though neither could win over the other, as Gia was pinned under Polaris's legs and Polaris was more than halfway off the edge. The announcer gave no comment and watched in hushed awe as the rest of the crowd. When Gia stretched out an arm to try and hit Polaris's torso, Polaris pulled the sword closer to try and get all the way back on stage. Polaris's struggles pressed down into Gia's chest, taking his breath every few seconds until Polaris was kneeling on the amnesiac, his feet still frozen in place and leaning as far backward as his body would allow. "Get off," Gia grumbled between gasps. The royal attendant swung his sword at Gia's throat, but the amnesiac blasted the sword out of his hand with another gust of wind. Speaking of gusts of wind, I don't know if anyone can hear that that's watching, but there's a wind warning in my area, and it's howling past my house. I don't know if it's getting picked up on the tiny microphone on my phone, but if it is, you can hear the wind howling, just like the book. Polaris then manipulated his aura and produced big, bladed deposits of ice around his hands. He pointed one to Gia's throat. Just before he could call for Gia to yield, Gia held a bare hand up to Polaris's face and released some of his aura energy. But this time it manifested itself in a different way than he expected. A glowing sphere of soft white light pooled in Gia's hand, and then exploded as it launched into Polaris's face. This blast of energy knocked Polaris away, as though he had been hit in the face with a mace. The force of the blast even ripped Polaris's feet sideways out of their icy anchors. I am trying to resume broadcast again. I'm getting more and more weather warnings outside. Hi, George. There, okay. Thanks for watching, everybody who is still watching. I know I keep going in and out. The warnings that pop up on my phone for inclement weather have been pausing the broadcast. Snow squall warning is what we're getting here in Wisconsin. That's the first time I've seen that as an actual thing. Snow squall. I know they exist, but I've never actually been in one. The force of the blast even ripped Polaris's feet sideways out of their icy anchors. Polaris landed flat on his back, one arm and one leg hanging like thick strips of meat, toward, but not touching, the out-of-bounds ground. Gia got up and held his chest with his left arm, still struggling to breathe normally, and staggered to Polaris's side. He could just nudge Polaris with his foot and claim the trial, but wanted to win a fair fight. Gia extended his right arm to the royal attendant and tried to relax his pained and indignant face. "Yield, please." Polaris was barely conscious after the exchange, but he looked at Gia with the same hatred he had shown after the second round. Still, Polaris responded with, "I yield." The attendant rolled voluntarily off the stage and onto the ground. He landed on his feet and hobbled into the parting crowd without looking back. He brushed away the hands of assistants that reached for him and disappeared into the night. "Gia, you have won the trial by combat. Please present yourself to the people." The guard's voice was audible over the murmurs of the crowd. Gia turned to the people and took a deep breath. He decided the moment called for some kind of explanation. Maybe that got a bit more violent than it needed, but he was a challenging opponent. I didn't expect many of you to trust me, but I want you to know that I want peace. I don't understand your war, but I appreciate that you're fighting for something. Forgive me for the scene I've caused, and I will be on my way. The people of the city gave a low head bow, and some held their hands together over their chests. Then, almost as if nothing happened at all that night, the people resumed their festivities, and may as well have forgotten the whole event. They have accepted you, Gia, Nova said from the side of the stage nearest to him. He had a smile on his face like a proud father. The one thing is, you're probably not going to be allowed to leave. What? Gia asked and dropped down onto the ground. I won their favor. What else do I need to do? 1 year of service in the army, minimum, the king said, parting the crowd. Those in earshot either trembled or bowed at the waist. I can't rightly say you're my subject, but the people accept you into their society, a society I rule over. That means you must obey our rules. That means at least 1 year of service as a soldier for every man old enough to shave and too young to gray. Your Majesty, I can leave you alone and find some other place to call home, and you'll never have to worry about me again. Gia tried to find out what to do with his hands while speaking directly to the king in front of everyone. Now everyone knows. Maybe you don't appreciate it yet, but your world just changed. Magillo stepped between Nova and the amnesiac. I'm sorry, I don't know what I did back there. You just beat my attendant in combat, and you can attack with pure energy. What greater sign do we need? Sign? How can an angel forget? Magillo showed him an open hand. Heaven's light shine upon you. He lowered the hand and clicked his heels together. 1 year of service, starting immediately. You will report to General Nova. Oh, and you'd better come back here when you get done. We have to find the other angels or this war will never end. Yes, sir. Gia didn't know how to stop what he said. I mean, Your Majesty. That's about as much as I can read all at once, I think, without having a drink or something. That is 80 pages into the book. So I've so far read that much on stream, that much of the whole book on stream. I know it's been a while since I've streamed. My work schedule changed a lot. My whole employment situation changed a lot over the last couple weeks. So I'd love to make a better habit of this. I have been blogging more often. If you see my blog posts, please share them, like them, comment on them, do anything you can to increase visibility. Even if you don't have the money to buy my book yourself, someone you know might. Someone you know might be interested. Again, that's Withered Kingdom. I believe this camera is going to reverse the logo there, or the title. But Withered Kingdom, that I've just been reading from, is my most recent fantasy novel. It's for sale for $12 on Amazon right now as a paperback. So this exact type of binding and everything, $12. I think that's pretty cheap, pretty good bargain. I know a lot of people don't have money for frivolous things like reading books these days, so I'm not charging too much. And if you need to save even more money but still want to support me, you can download the ebook on Kindle. It's only $3.99. That's way cheaper and a little more environmentally friendly in the sense that you don't print out any paper that way. I know a lot of people don't really read ebooks. There was a thing for a while there in like 2010 to 2012 where ebooks were a really big deal and they were kind of taking over the market. I do have plans to make a hardcover in the near future. I keep saying that. I just need to do it. Comment if you do want a hardcover version of the book, if you think that would be something you would read or would help motivate you to share it with other people. Hardcover always looks better on a shelf, even if it's a little harder, I think, to physically split open a book and read hardcover. I always think it's a little less readable than a paperback, but it's definitely more collectible. I should probably do a hardback just because I plan to do a full series of this. This is just one of 5 books that I have drafted to some level of completion now. The second book will be coming out hopefully this year. You have a lot of say in that, all of you watching. I know it's not a lot of people right now, but everyone you share this with, everyone that sees you liking or commenting, reacting to this video in some way, shape, or form, helps me a lot. It increases visibility, helps all the algorithms for Facebook. If I can get this video back from Facebook, I'll try to put it up on YouTube and then add it to my blog. My blog I always share on my personal Facebook page and on my my author page, Nathan T. Orgel Author. I share every blog update from there, but the website itself is www.fironianchronicle.com. It's a WordPress site, and I have been updating it about once a day this week. That's a lot more than I've ever done in the past, and it's something I want to keep up with as much as I can. That doesn't mean I won't miss a day here and there, but I'm getting more in the swing of things. I'm kind of realizing the way that I want the blog to work for me and how to share it more effectively, how to use social media more effectively. I plan to expand my presence into some other social media. That wind is really loud. Into some other social media platforms, like TikTok has been suggested before. I don't know. I'm starting to learn how to use Instagram. It's not my favorite thing in the world, but I know a lot of people use it, and you can link it really easily to Facebook, which is what I've been doing. So yeah, again, if you have already bought my book, or if you're not really interested in buying my book, it'd mean the world to me if you were to interact with this video in as many ways as you possibly can. That's any liking or love reacting or any kind of react that you can do boosts visibility. Any comments you leave always boosts visibility, and shares are always a really big deal. Helps increase the potential audience. I can't really do it all on my own. I need everyone's help. I'm a small-time author. I basically did everything all on my own except for the art on the cover there. Everything else, my wife took the picture of me on the back there, but like I designed this all through Kindle Direct Publishing. It's been a long journey, but I've finally gotten more stuff in print, and I want more to come soon. And I need as much support as I can get to make that happen. So thanks for everyone who has viewed this, or for whoever else will. I'm going to sign out now, I think. My throat is getting a little dry, and apparently there's a snow squall outside, and that could be dangerous, so make sure my house isn't getting destroyed by that. Just sounds like really violent wind. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching. I will see you the next time I do another live stream or post another video. Thanks, guys. Bye.